And good evening. Welcome to the March 18th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. At this time, I'd like to call to order, and please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And will the recording secretary please call the roll?
Commissioner Pletcher?
Here.
Commissioner Newman?
Here.
Commissioner McMahon?
Here.
Commissioner Lanson?
Here.
All present and accounted for.
Thank you. And moving on to item 4, written comments, announcements, supplemental packets, continuances. Mr. Parker, anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. We do not have any this evening.
Well, that was quick. Let's move on to number 5. Public comments. I don't have any public comment cards or requests to speak. So we will move on to number 6, the consent calendar. And for the consent calendar, we have the consent calendar with the minutes of February 11th, 2019. Any of my fellow commissioners have any comments, or can we get a motion to approve the minutes? Commissioner Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I move to approve the minutes and resolutions.
Very good. Will the recording secretary please prepare us for a vote? Should we do a voice vote? Okay.
And Commissioner Newman?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. And moving on to item 7, commendation for our previous chair, Mr. Doug Nichols. Mr. Nichols, will you join me at the podium?
We can look at the tape. And it was for
Always forget about that button you have to push.
Minor detail.
I believe so. Yes, perfect. Chair Nichols, this commendation is being given to you by the City of Thousand Oaks and the City Council, including our Mayor, Rob McCoy, on behalf of your work for the Planning Commission beginning on February 5th, 2013. And let me just read a little bit about your accomplishments during the time while you were on this commission with us. Mr. Nichols served on the commission until December 5th, 2018, during which time he served as chair twice, from April 13th, 2015 to April 25th, 2016, and then again from February 5th, 2018 to December 5th, 2018. And during his term with the commission, Mr. Nichols attended 70 planning commission meetings, voted on 230 applications, including commercial, residential, industrial, and institutional development proposals, as well as a variety of policy recommendations to the City Council, which included the Compatible Electronics Industrial Building, Sage Mountain Assisted Living Facility, the Hyatt Hotel Addition and Remodel, Westlake Center East and the Oaks Mall, solar carports, Justice Apartments, a new home company housing development, Caneo Coastal Property Townhomes, Caneo Merchant Industrial Building, Dick's Sporting Goods, Oakmont Senior Living Facility, amendments to Amgen's specific plan, Sepuy Trails Community Park, Gem Street Apartments, the Daily Group Mixed Use Project, Griffin Fine Living Assisted Living Center, Dave & Buster's Restaurant, thank you for that, Latigo Group Mixed Use Project, Downtown Core Master Plan, Silverado Senior Living Memory Care Facility, and California Lutheran University Science Building, along with 17 wireless communication applications, 15 municipal code amendments, an update to the forestry element, and amendments to the circulation and land use elements of the general plan. And finally, whereas the decisions and planning policies implemented or recommendations by the Commission during Commissioner Nichols' tenure have been instrumental in protecting and enhancing the environment of the Caneo Valley for the benefit of its citizens. Then in addition, as we typically do with outgoing chairs, an honorary gavel.
Oh, thank you.
For you. And there you are.
Thank you very much.
And I just want to say once again, for me, it's been a great honor serving with you. Between, your work is certainly, when I first got on, you came over to me, mentored me, taught me in the ways of the Planning Commission, which, we have a lot of new planning commissioners here, and I hope that those remaining will do the same. And really allowed, I think, between the two of us, we found great consensus in a lot of our work, and we really pushed hard to, I think, get the 5-0 votes. And I think, I think both of the times you were chair, I believe I was on the Planning Commission, so I thank you for your leadership on behalf of myself and all of the remaining commissioners.
Thanks very much.
You.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
And just a moment, I'm going to return to the dais and allow some of my fellow commissioners to speak. And if you just remain right here, if you'd like to also have any comments you'd like to say at that time, you certainly can.
Absolutely. Did you want me to speak now, Mr. Chair or Mr. Vice Chair, or are you going to? Wasn't quite sure the order there.
Well, just maybe wait until I'm sure my fellow commissioners have a few words to say, and I'll start with Commissioner Newman.
Thank you, David.
And Commissioner McMahon.
I want to echo everything that Commissioner Newman said, and I also want to thank you for your insightful and questions. You asked the best questions. You came from a background where you knew as much as anyone could about the subject, it seemed like, and I learned a lot from you, from the questions you asked. A lot of things that did not occur to me. I think I'm learning a little bit more as we go along, but you got me started, and I really appreciate that. And everything you did with us, I think we accomplished a lot, and I do appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
And Commissioner Lanson.
You know, when you had to unceremoniously not show up for a meeting because you happened to get elected to something, we again, as I said before, went on for an hour how awesome you were. Unfortunately, you didn't hear that apparently. So I will summarize briefly what I said at that time is I can't think of a better role model for what a planning commissioner is supposed to be than you. From mentoring all of us to getting involved in the issues and going deep into the documentation. I think one of the best things about this planning commission is that each one of us comes from a totally different point of view sometimes in looking at things. And again, it's not because we necessarily all agree. It's actually when we have people that bring up things that we may not see. And you were always really good at that. And I appreciate your insight and your involvement and ultimately your commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it.
And I know I already spoke, but I just am reminded, I think as this is my last night as well on the Planning Commission, I can say I can walk away now knowing where all the fire turnarounds are in the city because of your experience. And all joking aside, though, your questions, as Commissioner McMahon noted, were certainly welcome, and they not only brought more to each application that we heard, but taught, I think, each one of the commissioners a little bit more about your experience, your expertise, and your background, which I think was a valued addition to the Planning Commission. So with that, I turn it over to you, sir, if you have any final comments.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you all for the very kind comments. I appreciate that. But, you know, I just look at the group that we have here and some of those who have gone on before us that have really set the standard for what the Planning Commission is. And it's not really a high-profile group, except when we have a high-profile project. We get through the projects, you know, month by month, just trying to, you know, keep the city business moving forward and putting in your time, reviewing the plans, reviewing the documents, and the lengthy EIRs, which takes lots of reading. And I appreciate all your efforts to do that, and I'm glad I could contribute. As I was hearing Drew read this list, I thought, man, if only the projects took that much time, you know, where we could just rattle them off and be done with it. But we did spend a lot of good time to go through those to make sure we were making the right decision. And you know, I think we did achieve a lot of 5-0 votes. Maybe not all of them were that way, but nonetheless, we had good discussion, good debate, and good interaction with the staff and the applicants. And as you were talking about appreciating the questions, I thought, well, I'm not sure that the staff maybe appreciated all the questions, but Will here is our representative, and he's always on top of things and always quick to respond to the questions, and certainly a lot of respect to the staff for their contribution for this organization. As I was reflecting of the time that's passed, I realized in those intervening 6 years, we now have a new city manager. Andy Fox is no longer on the council. We have a very new council. We've got some new council members, 2 more that are going to be joining us tonight. And how much the city has changed. John Prescott used to be the community development director. Now Mark is. Mark used to be sitting where Kelvin is. And I just see the changes that have happened in just a very short period of time, and we've got a lot of work ahead of us. I say us because I still consider myself active in the community, but it's going to let rest on your desks a little more quickly than the rest of us. And then I also think of, even with my family, now I'm a grandparent, and I wasn't 6 years ago, and I have an additional son-in-law, which I didn't have before. But I do want to thank them for support. I've got my wife here, who, even with all the support and tolerance that she demands, she still is only in her 20s. It just amazes me how that happens. And I have my oldest daughter, Rebecca, and son-in-law, Keith, and the 2 grandchildren with us, Lincoln and Lydia, and then my youngest daughter, Emily, who joined us. So I just want to thank them. They've been a real asset to me on the Planning Commission, and especially when it comes time to campaigning. I always support, if we got a nice big family, recruit them for campaigning. It certainly helps. So I want to just thank them. But I see all the changes that have happened, and when I think of some of the projects that, as I'm sure you do, you drive through town, see certain projects, it kind of brings back those hearings and the discussions that we have, and now you actually get to see it kind of taking place. And sometimes you scratch your head and go, that's not quite what I thought it was going to be, or, man, that was spot on, exactly what it was. But just to realize that you had a part in that process, and how appreciative I am just to have that opportunity, and now you are exercising that opportunity. And as far as mentoring, thank you for those comments. I, too, was mentored, and I think that's just incumbent in what we do, is what we take on and move forward, that what we were shared with us, we in turn share with others. And I think probably more than anything else, I want to thank the public for coming down and sharing their comments. It's nice to rely on professionals coming from various walks of life to share their thoughts here at the dais, but it's really the comments that come from the public and the well-thought-out presentations by the applicants that give us information we need to make quality-informed decisions. So I want to thank them as well. But thank you again, and Andrew, I know you're going to be stepping off the dais, and thank you for your service and continued. I'm sure we're not going to see the end of you yet. And I got Mr. Cohan and Mr. Buss are going to be joining the dais here. I want to welcome you and look forward to your contributions as well. And I'm just a phone call away if I can offer any help. It'll be unbiased, honest. But again, thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Moving on to 7B, I will turn it over to Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So now we have a presentation accommodation for outgoing Commissioner Mr. Pletcher. Would you please join me over at the podium? With that, I'll take a moment to read a commendation for Commissioner Pletcher. He was appointed to the Thousand Oaks Planning Commission in August of 2016 by Councilmember Joel Price. He served on the commission up until tonight, and he served as acting chair from February 18th of last year until March of this year. During his term with the commission, Commissioner Pletcher attended 26 Planning Commission meetings. He voted on 77 applications, including commercial, industrial, and residential projects. He voted on projects such as the Sapweed Trails Community Park, Gem Street Apartment Complex, the Daily Group Mixed Use Project, Griffin Fine Living Assisted Living Facility, the Dave and Buster's he championed earlier, the Latigo Group Mixed Use Project, the Downtown Core Master Plan, Silverado Senior Living and Memory Care Facility, Cal Lutheran University Science Building, several wireless communication applications, 7 municipal code amendments, an update to the forestry element of the general plan, as well as the circulation and land use elements of the general plan. And with that, I would like to take the opportunity for staff and your fellow commissioners to thank you for your time here. We really do appreciate what you brought to the commission, your keen legal mind in terms of asking questions and your analysis of projects. You always had great questions to keep staff on their toes, particularly our attorney this evening. We appreciate everything you've done for the city, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in some capacity.
Thank you.
With that, I present you with this wonderful plaque.
I forget, do I stay here? Okay.
Now that we've had that opportunity, are there any commissioners that would like to speak on Commissioner Pletcher at this time? Commissioner Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Parker, and thank you, Mr. Pletcher. You know, in your 2+ years on the commission, I'm very glad to get to know you. Above all, I appreciate your sense of public service and want to thank you for that. It certainly didn't start here. You served on the Traffic Commission before this, and as others have mentioned, we probably haven't seen the last of you in city life. I want to thank you for that. As a fellow cyclist, I especially want to thank you for all you've done to make Thousand Oaks, which is already one of the world's greatest cycling cities, an even better place to be a cyclist. So thank you for that. And above all, thank you for your sense of civic duty. Thanks, Drew.
Thank you.
Drew, thank you so much for everything you've done, and you usurped what I was going to say. Drew has a side project that he's working on that will benefit the city, and it's going to also benefit all the bicyclists. And maybe this will give you a little more time to get that done. It's really wonderful the way he is so proactive in what he does for the city, and he was a tremendous help on the Planning Commission, and I really appreciate everything you've done. It was a pleasure to work with you. Thank you.
Commissioner Lansing.
So about 2 years ago, when I was lucky enough to be appointed to this position, I got a chance to meet Mr. Pletcher. And the first thing that struck me is that he is not only involved and engaged and obviously reads everything and is very involved in the process, but you will not find a more committed person to this city if you try. And not only that, he demands anybody that he associates with to be just as committed as he is. And I took that as a very high honor to actually be involved and engage with him with regard to understanding issues. We went to a planning symposium last year, and I learned a lot more in terms of what his thought process is. Very smart, very astute, reads everything, understands everything. Honestly, I think the city is better off, obviously, with having you involved in the process. And I hope that you will come back and do something for the city because, again, we are better with you involved. Thanks.
Thank you.
Drew, would you like to add some comments?
Thank you very much to my fellow commissioners and city staff. I'll start there for indulging me, especially Assistant City Attorney Mr. Heher. I look over this list and you know, I too am reminded about the changes that have come over the city in the last few years. When I started, it was our chair was Darrell Reynolds, who had a fiery personality but a commitment to the city. And she taught me very, very early on to just how to focus in and look at these applications. And, you know, I know she's not listening. She's enjoying her large house in Texas. But, you know, I certainly, I start with thanking her. And as I mentioned to, you know, former Commissioner Nichols and Mr. Newman, Commissioner Newman, you two very, very early on were great mentors to me. And I enjoyed each, although, you know, very much on occasional votes, we voted the opposite way. I appreciated all your comments because I knew they came from that same committed place in the city. I think every one of us, I don't think there's any question that we love the city, and you know, we want to see the best for it, and we want to see the best in you know, carrying out what the council has put in front of us. And just very quickly, you know, unfortunately, we most likely won't be hearing too many more wireless applications, but I want to talk to the new commissioners just for a moment and certainly offer my congratulations to both of you. I certainly hope that your new positions, you will, you know, I too am just a short phone call away should you need anything. I really hope that you guys are coming in on a very great opportunity because so many other changes are coming down the pipeline. amendments and carrying out the Boulevard-specific plan. There's so many great projects that we have coming up. I look forward to paying attention from home and enjoying my Monday nights. No, there's actually nowhere place I'd rather be than here on Mondays. But I look forward to following along your commitment and both of your perspectives. I think coming from your background, you'll have unique and great things to add to the conversation here at the dais. And finally, to all the city staff, like Commissioner Nichols said, there's so many changes, and we had a lot of retirements over the last few years and a lot of new changes, but I've thoroughly enjoyed working with each and every one of you. It's been really my pleasure. And thank you for indulging me on my questions and having me push you just a little bit, because I think it comes from a good place and just for the betterment of the city. And as Commissioner McMahon said, yes, I have that side project and hopefully bringing a bike share program to Thousand Oaks, because I think it'd be just a perfect addition to all the great biking and cycling we have in this community. So thank you. And with that, I will return to the dais. And item 7C, oath of office by our city clerk for new commissioners, Mr. Nelson Buss and Mr. Kevin Cohen, and the reappointed commissioner, Ms. Sharon McMahon and Mr. David Newman. And would Ms. McGuire, I'd invite the new and reappointed commissioners to stand in front of the podium, and so we can administer the oath of office.
We'll sing it.
Stand next to the little one. It'll be fine.
Big guy, little Mike.
I got nothing to prove.
Will you all please raise your right hands and state your name when asked? Do you state your name?
Nelson Buss.
Sharon McMahon.
David Newman.
Kevin Cohan.
Solemnly swear or affirm that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which you are about to enter.
I do.
I do.
I do.
Congratulations to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, would the new and reappointed commissioners please come take your seat on the dais?
Down over there.
With that, would any of the exiting commissioners like to address the new planning commission this evening?
I didn't know I got first crack at it. Welcome. View's different up there. No, as I mentioned before, certainly before I leave, I want to welcome you and say it is a great honor. You truly sit as administrative law judges, really, under the law, looking at each application that comes before you objectively and fairly and considering all sides. I know both of you will do great. Both of you will bring your own perspective and your own knowledge and your own input and comments and make this commission all that much better. So welcome, congratulations. And like I said, if you need anything at all, Commissioner Lanson knows where to find me. So don't be afraid.
Mr. Newman?
Mr. Nichols, but that's okay.
Nichols, I'm sorry.
We've had the same initials. We've been battling this for a long time. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Mr. Cohen, Mr. Buss, welcome aboard. And welcome back, Mr. Newman and Ms. McMahon. As I mentioned, you'll do the city well by being here. You both bring different backgrounds. That's one thing that I really appreciate about this group is it doesn't take a professional planner because we have professional planners on staff. What it takes is people are willing to dedicate some time to study the issues to make a wise and well-informed decision from the perspective from which they come, and I know you both will do that. I want to thank you for committing your time to this. Obviously, you have to go through the process, put your name in the hat, go through an interview or more to be selected. And I know there's probably some expectations as to, gosh, how do I vote because of who appointed me or whatever that might be. But I would just say, hey, you're here for a reason. You bring something to the dais, and just be who you are. If you're the lone yes vote or the lone no vote, so be it, because you want to speak from your heart and make sure that you have the commitment behind you. And once you do that assessment. But what I also found is that you get the materials, you read through them, you kind of sort out the issues. You hear from staff, you hear from the public, you hear from the applicant. Wait till you hear from everybody before you make that final decision. And I can remember years ago when I was attending my very first planning commissions, and this was many years ago, not as a commissioner, but just as an observer, I realized that one person standing in this position here could make an impact on your votes. And so just be attentive to who that one person might be at any given moment. They're going to bring something forward that you may have never heard before or may never have considered before, and it just causes you to think. So keep the perspective as to what the issues are, but then also what the community policies and processes are, and an open mind until the very end when you're actually going through that deliberation process. But I know you both are more than qualified to do that, and I look forward to a cohesive group and reaching well-informed decisions. But again, thank you both and welcome aboard.
Would any new or reappointed planning commissioners like to provide any comments at this time? Okay. With that, I'd like to open nominations for election of chair of the Planning Commission for 2019. Commissioner Lanson.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. As the longest-serving commissioner that hasn't been a chair, I'd like to actually nominate Sharon McMahon to be chair.
Commissioner McMahon.
What am I supposed to say?
I
accept the nomination. Thank you.
With that, Commissioner McMahon has accepted a nomination. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are now closed, and we are ready for the vote. Secretary, would you please prepare us for a vote?
We'll have to do a verbal vote. So I'll start with Nelson Buss. Commissioner Buss? Commissioner Lanson?
Aye.
Commissioner Cohan?
Aye.
Commissioner Newman? And Commissioner McMahon?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Congratulations, Commissioner McMahon, on being elected chair. Please take your position as chair of the commission.
Thank you very much, fellow commissioners. At this time, I would like to open nomination and election of Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. Commissioner Newman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll follow Commissioner Lanson's lead, and as the longest-serving non-chair or vice chair, nominate Commissioner Lanson for the vice chair spot.
Okay. Commissioner Lansing?
I would accept the nomination. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay. If none, the nominations are closed. Will the secretary please prepare us for a vote? Did we have a motion?
Motion carries 5-0.
Congratulations. At this time, we were going to move to the lobby for a 20-minute reception. Everybody's welcome. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for coming back, everybody. Will the clerk please open the public hearing?
Hearing advertised as required by law is hereby open to consider agenda item 8A, case number numbers SUP 2009-70409, OTP 2011-70164, and LTP 2018-70271. The request is to allow the construction of a public storage building with parking reduction, removal of one oak tree and one toyon tree, and encroachment into the 25% or greater natural slope. The project is located at 2650 Willow Lane and 224 South Skyline Drive. The applicant is James Sandifer.
Thank you.
Presenting this item on behalf of staff will be Associate Planner Will Chua from the Planning Department.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Good evening, Chair McMahon.
Excuse me. One moment, please.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes, thank you, Chair McMahon. I'd like to address the public as to matter of agenda item A8. I'm going to have to recuse myself from this hearing. My employer, Stantec, was hired by the project manager to prepare an environmental checklist. While I did not receive any money directly from the property owner or project manager for this project, my employer was compensated for the time spent on this project. Since my company provided some initial work on this project, I also want to avoid any impression on the merits of the project, and therefore, for these reasons and abundance of caution, I'll recuse myself from the hearing of item A8. I will return to the dais after the hearing is completed.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. You can go ahead.
Good evening, Chair McMahon, members of the Commission. For your consideration tonight is an application requesting to allow encroachment within 25% or greater slope for the construction of a self-storage facility with reduced parking. The project also requires removal of one oak tree and one toyon tree on site. This is a vicinity map showing the general direction of the general location of the project. The site is located on the south side of Willow Lane between Hampshire Road and Cuneo School Road. The 101 freeway is just immediately to the north of the project site. This aerial photo shows the freeway on the north side of the property, where my mouse is right now. There's a children's facility to the east side, which is a school. On the south side is a vacant residential property, and to the west is another self-storage facility that's on a 3.52 acre lot. The storage building has a total square footage of 69,452 square feet. This was approved in 1985 with no waiver of municipal code or other applicable guidelines that were granted. There are 3 utility poles on the property. It's 1, 2, and 3. There are 4 oak trees. This is the oak tree that's being requested for removal. There are 2 oak trees in this area right here. There's another oak tree right here. The toyon tree is located around this area right here. And another off-site tree, which is not being affected by the project, is on the right-of-way outside the property.
Pardon the glare on this picture, but this is a southbound picture, a view of the property. On the southbound picture, the property is identified by the power pole where the mouse is, the mouse pointer. This is a closer look of the property. On the foreground is the PTS Furniture Building. And this picture is a picture of the site from the northbound side of the 101. This is the proposed site plan. The building will be situated towards the back of the building. There's a 20-foot setback between the building and the rear property line. And there's an easement at the back, which is a privately owned parcel. The building itself is about 100 feet. It's 100 feet from the center line of Willow Lane. As you can see, there are the 3 oak trees that's being saved on site will not be impacted by this development. The oak tree that's being removed is around this area. And not to mention, there are parking spaces towards the front sides, in front of the building and to the east side. And there are 5 parking spaces within the footprint of the building in this area right here. This next slide shows the building elevation, proposed elevation. It will have a gray stone finish and 4 windows along the front facade of the building. The building overall has a rectangular shape. This shows the grading plan for the project. There are step retaining walls on the driveway. These step retaining walls are required because a single wall, the required retaining wall here would be about 14 to 14.5 feet high. So the walls were broken up into not more than 6 foot in height, with a planter in between. This slide, along with the next 2 slides, will show a photo simulation submitted by the applicant. This one depicts the one on a view from the northbound side of the 101 freeway. This is pretty much almost across the subject site, the project site. This next slide depicts the proposed facility from the southbound side of the 101 freeway. The building to the right is the PTS Furniture. The area between the proposed building and the PTS Furniture is where the existing self-storage facility is located. This is another depiction of the proposed storage building. It's important to note that staff has not determined the accuracy of this photo simulation, and this is all prepared by the applicant. As a background, the project site is zoned M1, and it's 1.63 acre in size with 3 single-family dwellings. As mentioned earlier, there are 4 oak trees on the site, 1 toyon, and another oak tree located within the right-of-way. There are 3 power poles, as we mentioned earlier. In 2009, the City Council initiated the General Plan Amendment 2009-70407 at the applicant's request and authorized concurrent processing to allow the applicant to proceed with the General Plan and Land Use Amendment accord in concurrent with a medical office building application. In 2014, the applicant requested to proceed with the General Plan Amendment and the zone change. So the zone change on this property was changed from RE to M1. In in early part of 2018, the property has changed hands where the owner, the current applicant, is now the new owner. The proposed building will have 100,138 square feet of building with 23 proposed parking spaces. By the way, the facility will have between 700 to 800 rental units. Surrounding land uses, as we mentioned earlier, on the north side of the property is the 101 freeway and Willow Lane. To the east is a nursery or daycare school. The south side is a vacant residential lot. On the west side is the self-storage facility, which sits on a 3.52 acre lot and 69,500 square feet of building area. And like I mentioned earlier, no waivers were granted for this project when it was approved in 1985. Planning Commission review. This is going before the Planning Commission because this project occurs within 400 feet of a residentially zoned lot. It requires encroachment within 25% or greater natural slope, and it does not comply with the city's city guidelines, particularly the freeway corridor development guidelines and the precise plan of design guidelines. Staff made an analysis of the project against the freeway corridor guidelines. The project does not comply with 7 subsections of the said guidelines. These subsections pertain to silhouetting, extensive grading, visual interest, visual impact, facade exposure, building scale, and massing. Each of these subsections have been quoted in your staff report. The preceding slides will provide an analysis of the project for each aforementioned subsections. For silhouetting, this is a picture that you've seen before in a previous slide. The property is identified by 2 approximately 40-foot high power poles. The grading activity will lower this site by about an average of 20 feet, I should say. The building has a maximum height of 45 feet, and using the poles as a reference, it will be visible at approximately more than half the height of the poles. The building will not be blending into the natural backdrop because it will be sitting up around this area right here, and will have an adverse visual impact on the aesthetic conditions along the 101 freeway. Extensive grading. The project will require an export of 31,500 cubic yard. This grading activity is too excessive because it requires cutting into the hill which changes the topography and will significantly lower the site. The building architecture as proposed does not conform with to the site's terrain. Section A2 of the guidelines of the mentioned guidelines earlier requires that the building footprint reflects an integration of design that joins the building with the natural terrain and extensive grading avoided. Visual interest and impact. Section A3 of the corridor guidelines requires that all structures to avoid large, straight, blank facades. Visual interest in this design shall be provided by stepping the building back and creating more open space between the building and the roadway in both horizontal and vertical directions. The first and second floors of this building are not stepped back. As far as Section A4 is concerned, for visual impact, this section requires increased space between the building and the adjacent freeways to allow for landscaping. The building's massive look will disrupt the natural scenic view from the 101 freeway. The project does not provide ample area for landscaping to reduce visual impact, particularly on the west and the east sides of the building. This is the landscape plan submitted by the applicant, prepared for them by their landscape architect. On the top of your screen will be Willow Lane, and then freeway would be next to that. This is east side. We have a small landscape area, not even a landscape area, but a small slope area here. And we have a couple of trees on these sides with small planter areas. On the west side, we also have a slope to the adjacent property, which is the storage facility, and there are a few 24-inch trees proposed. This small area will not provide ample space for the tree to prosper or to have a healthy growth. Facade exposure. Section A5 requires building to be oriented at angles to the freeway to reduce the exposed facade, which will provide additional open space for innovative landscape designs and open up views from distant features. The proposed building sits parallel to the 101 freeway without any feature that is angled to reduce the exposure from the freeway. As mentioned in the previous subsection of this before, the project does not provide for additional open space for innovative landscape designed to reduce that exposure. The landscape area, as we said, is very narrow to support healthy growth of the trees. Again, building mass and scale. Section B1 of the guidelines requires building architecture to make creative and innovative statements, but does not appear as imposition on the landscape. Building must be designed at a scale and manner that is sensitive to the terrain, reflecting an integration of the architecture and topography. The proposed building has height that is massive and imposing over the existing landscape. The building design is not sensitive to the site terrain and is not adequately integrated into the topography. The first and the second floor should be stepped back to reduce visual massing. As far as Section B2, the building massing, that section requires the use of design articulation to break up building mass into smaller components. The use of angled building corners, sloping facades, projecting and recessing of walls, opening sections of the building, and integration of landscape elements will help reduce a bulky appearance. The building architecture provides massive walls with fall windows. It does not provide enough articulation to break up the building mass into smaller components. The building has sharp corners instead of angled corners. It has no sloping facade and not enough landscape element to help reduce the bulky appearance. Building mass and scale. This is part of the precise plan to design guidelines. Section H1A of the said guidelines states that nondescript or boxy building without any recognizable architectural character, style, or detail. This is part of what is discouraged by the said guidelines. The proposed building, as you saw earlier in the elevation plans, the building is pretty square. It's got a lot of sharp corners, and it lacks architectural character. The faux windows look flat against the building facade, and the building lacks interesting features such as roof or any other articulation. As for the municipal code standards, the parking requirements for I'm sorry, let me back that up, back off a little bit. For parking standards, for commercial buildings that exceeds 50,000 square feet, 2 loading and offloading spaces are required by the code. The project requires 24 parking spaces. The way we calculated these parking spaces is that, like in the past, we used the warehouse use as a parking demand for this type, which is 1 per thousand for the first 5,000 square feet, so that would be 5, and then 1 per 5,000 for the remaining thereafter. That's how staff came up with the 24 spaces. This project provides 23 parking spaces, which is one short of what is required. Staff does not support waiver of the parking standards for the following reasons. The project is too intense compared to the adjacent facility. The adjacent facility sits on a property that is almost twice the size of the subject site, 3.52 acres versus 1.63. The building next door has two-story and a single-story elements. In addition, there are no parking waivers granted for the said facility. That building next door is 30% less than what is being proposed on a site that is almost half its size. In addition, there are 5 parking spaces being proposed within the footprint of the building. And since the existing residences are being demolished, staff believes that the facility can be designed to meet city standards. As for grading, the 25% or greater natural slope occurs towards the rear of the property. Total natural slope area for the property is 12,570 square feet, which is about 17 or almost 18% of that site. 100% of the natural slope is being affected by this grading activity. Portions of the site will be lower by 20 feet or so. It will require 31,750 cubic feet of cut and 250 cubic yards with the next export of 31,500 cubic yards. This will require 2,250 truck trips using a 14 cubic yard truck. Off-site grading on Willow Lane will occur for driveway access, and with that, they will require a encroachment permit from the city. This next slide shows the section view of the grading. As you can see, the building will be 4 stories high. This is the line of the natural terrain, and portions of the building will be this would be cut into this much. So this is how much of the site is being graded. As far as the oak tree and landmark tree, they are requesting to remove 120-inch diameter oak tree rated in poor health. They're also requesting to remove one multi-trunk toyon tree. It's got 8 trunks totaling 23 inches. This toyon tree is being rated in good health. The project, as proposed or as designed right now, requires the removal of both of these trees. However, approval of this permit is not necessary if the project is denied by the Commission. Environmental review. This qualifies as a Class 32 categorical exemption under CEQA Section 15332, which is infill development, for the following reason. It's consistent with the general plan designation. It occurs within city limits, and it has less than 5 acres in size. The site has no value as a habitat for endangered, rare, threatened species. Approval of this project would not result in any significant effects relating to traffic, noise, air quality, or water quality. This site can be adequately served by all required utilities and public services. The proposed building is not physically suitable for the property. It does not fit as indicated by a need for a waiver of the parking standards. In addition, the project proposed does not comply with several elements of the city's freeway corridor guidelines and the precise plan of design guidelines. As we pointed out in our previous slides, of course, the project also requires extended grading, altering the natural topography. The building will have significant visual impact because of its bulk and massive appearance. It lacks angled corners and sloping facades to break up the facade into smaller components. The project does not provide ample landscape area to reduce its visual impact from the 101 freeway. And for this reason, staff believe that the project will have an unmitigated, significant visual impact. Therefore, staff is recommending that the Planning Commission deny SUP 2009-70409, OTP 2011-70164, and LTP 2018-70271. Staff is now, that concludes my presentation, and staff is available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chua. That was very thorough. I appreciate that. Are there any questions? Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll also add my thanks, Mr. Chua. I appreciate very much that as a city we have architectural guidelines, and I very much appreciate your report that lays out where the project is in compatibility with those guidelines and where as currently constituted it is not. So thank you for that. I just have two questions, quick ones. The first is that you mentioned that there is a right-of-way in front of the property. It is not part of the applicant's property. And my question is, who owns that land?
That portion is owned by the city.
Okay.
Right of way in the city.
So that driveway that currently goes up to the property is city land?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And my second question has to do with two areas you touched on in your report. And the bigger one is a public safety question about having to do with brush clearance. There are areas where you mentioned there are relatively narrow strips around the proposed building. And this is problematic both for potential growth of future trees, but also for brush clearance, that the applicant would be required to offer easements to adjoining property owners to do the brush clearance. So essentially, the applicant would need to cover whatever costs are incurred with clearance on neighboring properties. Is that correct?
Yes. The intent of that is to provide the applicant to make sure that the project will not cause a burden on an adjoining property. Because once a building is built on this property, the fire department will require them to provide brush clearance.
Right, and there are minimum limits around
Yes.
or around each building for clearance. So my question is really a general question. It pertains to this application, but I'm not singling out this application. I'm asking in general what the protocol is here when there's a proposal that leads to relatively narrow boundaries around a building between the edge of the building and the edge of the property, which requires these easements that spill onto neighboring properties. My question is, what happens when the neighbor who currently has an undeveloped piece of land wants to develop that land?
What happens is that the brush clearance will wipe itself out, will wash itself, because once they develop their property, they will also have that 100-foot brush clearance. So it will meet at the property lines, so that the property owner developing the vacant property will perform his own brush clearance now.
Right, but if the neighboring property, if the neighbor has, and I'm only speaking hypothetically here. Again, I'm not singling out the applicant here, but let's say we have two properties. We'll call them A and B. First along comes A property. The applicant wants to put a building that's very close to the property line, so it requires an easement. And let's say that's granted. And then sometime later, owner B comes along and says, hey, I want to put a building close to my property line as well. I don't think that would comply in some cases. If they're both close enough to the property line, I don't think that would comply with the brush clearance. So my question is, who takes precedence there?
Well, no, I mean,
Commissioner, if I can
Please,
add some comments to that.
please.
Each building, the one being proposed tonight and a hypothetical building that we built in the future, would be required to comply with the fire department requirements in terms of construction type. As it relates to brush clearance, it may impact the type of construction the new building has to have in order to provide fire safety.
Does that provide a first mover advantage where whoever builds out close to a property line first then gets some advantage as a result?
Potentially, depending on a number of factors. One, what type of building the existing building is. Two, the fire zone that the particular property would be located in. And three, the proposal that would be coming in, what type of construction they would need. So it's a variable scale. It's not something that's set in stone. There are considerations for that in the fire code.
And again, I'm only speaking hypothetically here, but if what we have here tonight, and this is not hypothetical, is a case of a building that gets quite close to a property line, requiring an easement in the neighboring. If a neighbor decides to do the exact same thing, to put a large building close to the property line, which would require, again, a perimeter that goes outside the property line, do I understand correctly that they would be precluded from doing that because, let's call them owner A, had first done that?
I don't know that they would be precluded from doing that, but they would have to meet and comply with what the fire department would require in order to construct. Yes.
Right. So if they're not able, because the first property owner has built close to the line, if they're not able to meet the 100-foot or 150, whatever the perimeter requirement is, then the second owner would not be able to build something similar to the first owner. Is that correct?
Depending on the situation, they would have to take that into consideration.
All right.
And if I may, Commissioner Newman, I would just say that the easement itself might be revocable. We'd have to look at the language of the easement in your hypothetical. And then, of course, the property owner has their own rights, so they're going to make sure that their rights to their own property is going to be primary versus someone who's going to take an easement for a while for brush clearance, as an example. And so what would happen is once they want to develop that property and they know there might be an easement on that, the purpose of that easement is strictly for that brush clearance. So that might be altered, of course, if there's going to be some development. As Mr. Parker said, there is an issue with making sure the fire, which we always do, is involved. And then they kind of give us some of the rules and also some of the alternatives for dealing with that issue if it arises, depending on the situation, whether it's commercial or residential, and they come up with some certain options as well. But it's a great point, but certainly it's something that we would look at it no matter what happens with a new development if one was to come up next to one that has a easement on it.
And I appreciate that, Mr. Heer. Thank you for fleshing that out. So just so I'm clear, my question is a general one pertaining to the order and whether there's a hierarchy of easement rights or rights to an easement. And it sounds, if I understand correctly, as if you're saying there is a potential, given identical commercial properties of this type, where a first mover might have an advantage by gaining rights to an easement that a second property owner doing the exact same thing might not. Is that a potentiality down the road?
That's a tough one, depending on, because of your hypothetical, which is difficult. I would say that if you have the purpose of this easement requirement is to ensure that there's going to be brush clearance, and so we request that the applicant actually do that for the property next door if it's vacant and there's brush clearance responsibilities. If that owner of that, the easement holder of that property, decides that they want to develop it or something of that nature, their rights to that property is going to be primary over that easement. And the way the easement is probably going to be written is going to be subject to the primary owner's right to develop the land as necessary. But your point about what do you do with these fire issues obviously is something that would have to be analyzed every time there's going to be some type of development, again, commercial versus residential, and what is there at the time.
Yeah, and again, my question is about precedence. It's not really about this application or this other application. It's about looking at multiple applications
Sure.
in their totality rather
Right.
than one
And,
at
there,
a time.
and there's different kinds of easements. Some are obviously much more restrictive as far as how they're going to be applicable to a certain situation. And so some easements are going to be in perpetuity, for example, to ensure that the person had the easement rights, such as a driveway or a roadway across someone's property. That's something that's going to be more permanent. An easement of this nature might not be as permanent.
So to wrap up the discussion, what type of easement is contemplated in this application?
If I can just add to the comments of Mr. Heher, this particular application is for brush clearance to allow access to a property to clear brush. If there was a proposal to build on the other property up to that property line, there would no longer be brush, so there would no longer be a need for brush clearance.
All right. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Mr. Chua, thank you very much for that presentation. Highly informative. I did want a couple of things clarified for me. You mentioned that there's a storage facility directly next door on a 3.6 acre property that's 30% smaller than the one proposed, and that it was built in 1985 without any waivers or any requests for any changes of city guidelines. My question is would that building still hold true today if that building was going to be built in 2019?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
That was a great question. I'm glad you asked that. Commissioner Lanson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Chua. That was a very detailed report. I appreciate everything you put into this process. With that said, there is a few questions. First of all, in light of our former chair, does this require a fire truck turnaround in any way?
Yes, it does. And if you look at the grading plan on the screen right now, this area right here is the designated turnaround area that's approved by the fire department.
So that has been approved as it stands, right?
Yes.
I noticed we had some materials before us. I'm assuming this was from the applicant and not the city?
Yes, it is from the applicant.
Have you seen these at all?
Yeah, I've brushed through it.
Okay. Aside from, I know there are people here to speak, presumably later, did you get any neighbors' comments, any involvement from the public as to this application?
I've received, I spoke to an individual who represents the Westlake Storage next door, and he's concerned about the grading. We initially spoke to it, but he did not give me any written statement about this project.
And is there any concern by virtue of the fact there is a public storage next door? Did that go into your evaluation at all as to the fact there would be maybe another storage facility next door?
No. This project is being evaluated on its own merit, not because there's the presence of a self-storage next door.
And lastly, in your conclusion on the written documentation, you indicated that to the extent that we would support this, we would need to establish findings to justify approval. Is that from a factual standpoint, or what kind of findings would you be looking for?
Well, you will have to I mean, as mentioned in the staff report, the resolution, the Freeway Guideline Corridor Resolution standards can be waived by the approving authority, either the Planning Commission or the City Council. So if the Planning Commission decides to approve this project, one, they will need to provide findings that supports the project. They will state what waivers are being granted specifically, and basically indicate that the project either complies or waivers are being granted in certain aspect of the project.
By virtue of that, and again, the conditions that we don't have, obviously, because you haven't finalized those, would this be a two-step process where we'd have to come back to us again then?
Well, that is most likely the scenario is going to be. So if the Planning Commission decides to approve right now, we have as we mentioned in the staff report, we've shared the conditions of approval with the applicant. And if the third point I was going to make is that if the Planning Commission decides to support the application, the Planning Commission will have to give staff and the applicant directions on how they want to proceed, whether do they want to see a smaller building, do they want to see a 2-story, 1-story, 3-story building, do they want to see more landscaping on the sides. So these are the issues that the Planning Commission has to discuss. Now, if the Planning Commission decides to review those conditions right now, I have them here for distribution.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. This seems like a good time to read into the record. There are 5 statement cards. So we did have 5 people come and give a statement card. They don't wish to speak. All 5 of them are opposed to the application. It appears that they are opposed because of cutting down the trees. I'm not sure if they're opposed to the project itself, but they don't want it to go forward as is because of the trees, and that was 5 of them. At this time, we'll ask the applicant's representative to speak. I'm sorry. Of course.
Mr. Chu, I have one more question. There are additional neighboring properties over there. There's the PTS Furniture that we saw in the pictures. There's also a gym over there, Marty's Hobbies. I was curious, were any of those buildings granted waivers when they were constructed at the time they were built?
Sorry, thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have the history of those buildings. However, if you will compare those buildings to the one that was approved in '85, these are all 2-story buildings, and I'm not sure whether the health or the fitness gym has been granted any waiver, or as well as the PTS Furniture.
Okay, but they're all 2-story buildings.
Yes, they are.
Copy that. Thank you very much.
Oh, just to mention, the self-storage building is a combination of single and 2-story.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of commissioners? All right. At this time, I'll call up Mr. Neil Scribner. He is the main speaker, and so he has 15 minutes. Please state your name and city of residence.
I'm sorry? Oh, shall I start again? Okay. I'm Neil Scribner, architect for the applicant, Mr. Jim Sandifer. He's also here, should you have some questions. And Don Waite, civil engineer, is also here, if you have some questions for him. I'll try to answer as many questions as I heard, and please follow up and ask me if I miss them. The driveway is 30 feet instead of the normal 25 feet, and that's for the fire department so they can bring their heavy equipment in. All the curves getting into the site are 40-foot inside diameter, bigger than most streets, but that's what the fire department wanted. So we gave it to them so they could access the building. And that's for ladders so they can get up on top of the building if they have to. The front of the building would not require that, 30 feet. But the back of the building does, because it's over 30 feet. And your question about buildings, remember Main Street, USA, all the shops are common property lines. Some are infill, some are built same time, and they always manage to do it. It's very tricky sometimes, but it's done all the time. In fact, the industrial zoning, manufacturing zoning does not require setbacks at the back or the sides, only in the front. 100 feet required in the front. Usually that's parking lot. In this case, it's all landscaping. So let's see. Oh yeah, and one of the reasons this works is because the wall that you build on a common property line is a 4-hour rated wall. It's like an 8-inch block wall is rated 4 hours, so that you will not put a wood wall on a common property line. So that's how that's dealt with. The self-storage is normally a good neighbor because there's hardly any traffic. We have one employee, and usually if you have 1 or 2 tenants visiting the site within an hour. That's a crowd. Very seldom happens. In fact, we hired, at the request of the Public Works Department, a parking consultant to advise us how many spaces do we actually need for this project. Because what they do in the city, they don't have a parking, self-storage parking ordinance. So they use industrial. Well, industrial buildings have a lot of employees. We have one. The county has an ordinance, they require 2 parking spaces. And one of the reasons is that when people come to the self-storage, they go to their units. They don't park in a designated space. They go right to their units. So it's convenient and carry things in. Same with the elevator. They get as close to the elevator as they can so they can bring their items in. There's really no need for parking. However, the consultant recommended 13 spaces. My client paid a few thousand to get that report. That's what the norm is. That's based on national standards, I understand. So we would ask that you at least give us a break to 13 spaces. Okay, now the one space that we're missing, we thought that the staff was going to give us a 10% break. And after we drew the plans and they were in, apparently they changed their mind. So that's why it's one short. Let's see. I have designed 3 self-storage projects in Thousand Oaks. Mr. Shepard was my planner. None of those projects have service parking. And the reason is because the people don't use them. They go to their units. You couldn't put the service parking in the right spot. They wouldn't all park and then carry their items, 200 feet. They park right in front of their units or in front of the elevator. So that's why the city has not, until today, required parking, service parking for self-storage projects. So this is a first for me. So I ask that I don't think it's a condition, so I'm not sure how we deal with that, but I guess if it's not a condition, we don't have to do it, unless you ask for it. The existing site has 3 houses on it, old houses. Apparently 60 or 70 years ago, they started building houses there. And the site was graded quite haphazardly. And in fact, the picture that I gave you, the first one shows the driveway going up to the houses. Notice the mud that comes down from there because there's no asphalt. The house is in very bad shape. They leak, need a lot of work. And then the next pictures, you see some of the houses up there. There's 2 pictures with houses. There's actually more cars on that hill than we'll have at our self-storage. I think our traffic will actually come down when we build this project. So from that standpoint, I think we're helping the load on the street. Now the client plans to use, there's an easement that goes along the back of the site, 10 feet wide, goes down to Skyline. And then my client owns the 4 residential lots across the street. I guess what will be 4 residential lots. That site is below the street level, water stands there. So his plan is to convey dirt from this site, if he can. He has to get approval and everything, but that's his plan, to convey it down to that site so he doesn't have to use a truck at all. And hopefully we can do that and save all those trips. Now, the required landscaping for this, for an industrial site is 10%. We have 50% landscaping. 5 times what's required per the ordinance. And the reason is because we don't have to have as many parking as an industrial building does. Even though we provide it, but we're not putting any of it in the front setback. So that's all dedicated to landscaping. And I'll show you a picture of it in a minute. You've already seen it, but I'll show it again. The building coverage, the footprint of the building, the ordinance allows 50% footprint coverage. We are 35%, barely over half of what, or over half of what we can do. So we're obviously not too big for the site. I think the owner of the building next door, if he were to do it again, he certainly would not do a one-story self-storage. As you know, all the new self-storage are 4 and 5 stories. I did one on Skyline for the owner next door, actually. No, I'm sorry. I got it confused here. It's not for the owner next door. I did the one on Townsgate for the owner next door. Backs up to the freeway. That was many years ago. And then the one on Skyline was for a different owner that's has residential on 2 sides. It's 4 stories, 36 feet high. That was approved by the Planning Commission, of course. It shares a common property line with a restaurant on the south side. So the point is that self-storage floor to floor is 9 feet. Office buildings are normally 14 feet. So you can see we're 3 stories of self-storage, 27 feet, 3 stories of office building with roof. We're not required to have a roof on this building. If you put a roof on a 3-story office building, which requires, they can be in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 feet. So that's the difference in, so floor height doesn't mean that much from that standpoint. The west side setback, as I said, we really don't have to have a setback, but we did set back on the west side of the building for the purpose of putting trees. And I think the landscape plan that was shown there was not the one that was emailed to the staff a couple weeks ago. The new plan, because we'll ask for more trees, so we have added more trees all along the west side of the building. The landscape architect says she selected trees that would fit into that space. But if you want another few feet, I think we could move the building a few feet or just cut it off and create a little more space for trees if that's what you want. We would be willing to do that. Now, the next exhibit I have or handed you, these are pages from the View Corridor guidelines. When I go to the city to design a project, any architect, this is what they give you. Now, the first building there is about 20 feet from the freeway. It's 3 stories, 45 to 50 feet in height, and it's set back on the second and third floor. It says acceptable. Keep that in mind because we're set back about 170 some feet from the freeway with our project. Below that, it says the best solution is angled, and then the bad or the worst is straight line, and then in the middle it says better. That's what we are. That's where we fit. Our front of our building offsets as much as 50 feet from left to right, if you look at it closely. That's a huge offset. Plus, the top sets back as well. Now, when you look at it from the freeway, you have to look at it, either west or east of the site to see really just the top of the building because there are so many trees on their neighbor's property. So all you see is a little piece of the top of the building. When you're in front of this site, you don't see any building. And I'll show you that in a section. In fact, let's go to the next page. It shows a building setback, and that's more the way we are. We're way back, and there's also a ridge line behind us. That's the ridge line that looks over in the Hidden Valley from this area. So we've set our building in so we don't interrupt the flow of the mountain. And on this site, we're literally at the base of the mountain. Now at the bottom, this is interesting. Unacceptable. It shows a row of trees. You can't see a building. And this says that's unacceptable. But below that, there are trees, but you see buildings intermingled with the trees. That's acceptable. That's what the view corridor guidelines say. That's what I follow when I designed it. But for some reason, the staff report doesn't seem to follow that. And that concerns me. We also have an environmental impact report that says there's no visual impact from the freeway, no mitigation requested or necessary. That's in the environmental report. Again, my client paid a few $1,000s for that. Now, the first view corridor with the big sign up in the corner shows you the PTS in the foreground. PTS is 35 feet, no setbacks. You see our project up on the hill there. By the way, it is not 45 feet. It's 27 in the front and 36 in the back. You also notice there are trees in front of it. Our landscape plan shows enough trees to totally hide the building. That's what we're going to do. If you look next to the freeway, there's a 25-foot slope, and then you go across Willow Lane. The front of the site goes up steeply, and the trees there are actually higher than the building. That's why I say you can't see the building from the freeway when you're in front of the site. The next view, when you're going west and you're on the far side of the freeway, this was taken from the parking lane, I guess, or the whatever it is. And you see the breakup of the building, how the offsets and the top floor setback. That's a pretty good set. That's a lot more than what's shown here in the sample that they provide in the guidelines.
Mr. Scribner, can you wrap it up, please? I'm sorry,
well,
your 15
my client
minutes
isn't going to speak. Could I have a few more minutes? I really have a lot more, very important.
Yeah, we can give you a couple more minutes.
Okay, thank you. Next is the building itself. We've been working on this for almost a year. The staff's comments about windows and all that, first I've ever heard of it until tonight. I don't know why. If he'd brought this up before, we could have done something, maybe, but we could, if he's concerned about the windows, where they're located, I don't know. We can do something about that. Frame them or set them in a little bit or something. But sorry, I wasn't aware of this. If you notice the way we designed the front, it looks like a two-story building. Actually, it's only 27 feet as a notice. PTS is 35 feet. And then you see the 36-foot setback at the top. Now, let's go through the pictures quickly. Next picture, this is a four-story, minimal setbacks. It's the view shed, so-called view shed. It interrupts the mountains. That's an example, four-story building. Then you have the BMW, I guess it is. And then after that, there's a small two-story building. These are usually about 35 feet in height. And then the next one is, this is up a hill from the freeway. This building is, with the wall, is approaching 40 feet or so. No trees whatsoever. Next, we have the new Lowe's Center. Pretty big center from the freeway. And then finally, at the west end of town, the assisted living project. That's 35 feet there in the front. That's a pretty long facade from left to right. That's probably at least twice as long as our building. This also has a 50-foot wing in the back and a 40-foot wing in front of it. And it has a wall there in the front. You notice the height of the walls. This site was actually filled in to level it and raise the building. So that concludes. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner?
Mr. Scribner, thank you for your report, and
Sure.
thank you, Mr. Sandifer, for this application. Just a few questions. You mentioned that, is it Mr. Sandifer? I don't want to mispronounce your name. Great.
Sandifer, yes.
You mentioned he is also the property owner for the lot just east of Skyline Drive.
Yes.
And in your report, you said, and I'm quoting now, he doesn't have to use a truck to get the land, the 31,000 cubic yards of dirt off of this application. How is he going to get it? My question is, how is he going to get it down there if he's not using a truck? Is he going to have wheelbarrows, or how's that going to work?
It'll be on a conveyor belt. You may have seen this in
I have, yes.
different situations. It would go from the site through the easement. There's a 10-foot easement, which my client has a right to use. And we can take that down to...
And how would it get across Skyline Drive?
Well, you either take it over, or you can, put some kind of wheelbarrows or some way to move it.
That's, with 31,000 cubic yards, that's a lot of wheelbarrows.
That's a lot of dirt.
Yeah. I was a construction worker in my youth, and I think, well, I'd probably still be a construction worker if I was using a wheelbarrow to move 30,000 cubic yards of earth.
Might take a couple.
Do you have any input from, you'd mentioned a few things about trees and the tree plantings you're doing. You're taking out, or proposing to take out a couple of trees, but also planting quite a few trees.
Yes, there's 4 oak trees on the front, which we're saving, and there's no impact within the 5-foot drip zone.
Right.
There's one located in the back. It'd be right in the middle of the building. So we're removing that one. Then
right.
I'm sorry.
My questions are about the trees that you're putting in, the replacements. You're putting in several trees along the west end of the property.
Yeah, well,
partly to hide the building.
Yes, we're putting in that picture of the building. You notice it had all bushes in the front?
Yes.
Well, that's going to be loaded with trees.
Right. So I have 2 questions about that. One is whether your tree consultant, or I can come back when we go back to staff, if they have weighed in on the feasibility of long-term survival of these trees. That's one question. And then the second question is if you've had input from your consultant on, you mentioned that the trees would block a large portion, if not all, of the west facade of the building. And my question is, how long will it take those trees to grow to the height that you're showing in your simulations?
Well, I think we're asked to put in 72-inch boxes, so they'll probably be as high as the building when we put them in.
72 inches is 6 feet. Your building is more than 30 feet,
27
maybe more than 40 feet.
27 and 36. But if you look at the pictures, there are already some trees there, so
understood.
But
I'm looking at the simulations that you provided, and thank you for these. And there are several cases where the trees, I'm thinking of the west facade in particular.
On the west, okay.
I count 1, 2, 3 trees that are quite a bit larger than the building itself. And what I'm trying to find out is how long will it take for the trees to grow to this height?
Well, I would imagine what we put in would be about 2/3 of the height of those trees right there. And those are existing. Right?
And I'm sorry, how tall is the maximum height of the west facade now?
The front of the building is 27 feet, and the back is 36 feet.
Okay, so 2/3 of
So at the
36
back-
feet would be, you're planting a 24-foot tree, is that correct?
Yeah, 72-inch boxes, probably bigger.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And then the final question I have has to do with, you mentioned, you brought up the issue of the windows that that staff had mentioned in the report. I just want to verify, I think staff said that they were faux windows. They're not actual windows. They're there for articulation on the facade. Is that correct?
They are actual glass. You don't see through them. But they're actual glass, the same as you'd see on any office building.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner, anybody? Any questions?
So you're just, Mr. Scribner? Hi, how you doing, sir?
Hi.
So you were just saying that the 72-inch boxes that we're going to be putting in, but on the landmark design landscape plan, it's got different sizes for the trees. What's the discrepancy between what I've got in front of me and what you're telling me?
Well, what the landscape architect did was what we normally do, but the staff has asked for the larger trees. First time I've ever had that experience, but we will do it if that's what it takes.
Just a few questions, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Scribner, for going through this process. We're trying to understand a little bit of the specifics. With regard to the windows that we were discussing and the change to some of the structure, can you explain exactly what you would be willing to do now by virtue of what you understand the city is looking for?
Yes. The windows that we show would be applied on the outside of concrete block because you don't see through them. So they'd just be frames like a typical window, but on the outside of the block. So what we can do is we could recess 4 inches into the block with a thinner block detail and recess the mullions and the glass in, so it would feel more like part of the building.
Okay, and we'll have staff respond to that.
We can do that. Yes.
With regard to the parking, I know you said 12 instead of 13, and I know we're saying 23 instead of 24. Is there a way to modify your plans to provide for one more parking space?
We can add one more parking space, easy. That's not a problem. The reason I had 23 is because at one time the staff had told us they would agree to reducing 10%. So I'd reduced it to 23 from 25. And then Will has come up with 24, which is, I actually had 25, but we can add one more space easily. Those spaces out in front, closest to the freeway, we can just add one on the end of that row. That's easy.
Okay. The other thing we're talking about in terms of transporting the dirt, was that in the environmental report, or was that in anything that was submitted to the city for them to know that's what you intended to do?
The client just came up with this idea because of the report. And of course, it would save him a ton of money if he doesn't have to haul the dirt away. So first he bought the lots at the corner, half a block away. So if we have to make those trips, it'd be really fast. But if he didn't have to put the trucks out on the road at all, it would be even better. So by putting in the conveyor down the easement, so it's not on anyone's property, that would be a very clean, natural way to move the dirt.
I would think there'd be some evaluation in terms of the impact on surrounding neighbors that would have to be gone through.
Yeah, you're definitely right.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions.
Commissioner? No? Okay, I had one question. The 5 parking spaces that are in the building footprint, can you explain that to me, please?
Yeah, those are to meet the code. That's for code parking.
So does that mean that the first story of the building won't exist? It'll be an overhang and there'll be 5 parking
No,
places
it'd just
there?
be like an inside parking space, like a garage.
Oh, it'll be indoors. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Probably the employee would park there, I would imagine.
I see. Okay, thank you. Are there any
Sure.
other questions? Okay, James Sandifer, did you have any? Did you want to speak or come up for questions? Please state your name and city of residence for the record.
Hi, yes, I'm James Sandifer. I'm the owner of the proposed storage. And I did want to say one thing. You know, I don't know why I have to hide this building 100%. You know, we're on a freeway, and there's many buildings on the freeway, and they're all visible. You have the new Lowe's going in right now. You have the car dealers. You have this building. You know, all the buildings, you know, and to hide it completely, we're going to be very well hidden, but I don't know, I don't understand these giant trees and to block everything. I mean, we bought the property because it was on the freeway, and so I just want to bring that up. So do you have any questions?
Did you state your city of residence? I'm sorry.
Yes, I am. Yes. I live at Lake Sherwood area.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the owner? Okay, thank you so much. Next, we have Don Waite. I think. Okay. So he's saying from the audience that he's the engineer. Do we have any questions for the engineer? I guess you can stay seated. And next we have Russell Bauer. Yes, please come up and state your name and city of residence.
I'm Russell Bauer. I've been a resident of Thousand Oaks since 1993, and for transparency, I am the manager of SoCal Self Storage, the adjacent storage facility to the proposed new facility. My 10 years of experience, we actually have a problem at the current facility adjacent to you, where large 18-wheeler semi-trucks coming from out of state with people's furniture actually can't pull into our parking lot. They have to park on Willow Lane. Fortunately, right in front of our building, we have...
Excuse me, I'm sorry. You need to talk to us.
Okay, I'm sorry about
It's not a conversation back
Sure.
there. We need to hear from you.
I apologize
Okay.
about that.
Thank you.
We have an issue where large moving trucks actually can't make it into our parking lot, and they need to park on Willow Lane. As far as how this would affect the residences close to the storage facility, what is the biggest truck that can get into their location? And if they can't make it up to their property because of the curve of the driveway, where are they going to park? We're fortunate in that we have a sister facility on Townsgate Road a mile away, and when we identify customers that are coming from out of state, using a professional moving service, have a large 18-wheeler truck coming, we divert them to our Townsgate store, which can easily take a 110-foot semi-truck. So yeah, I was curious as to what is the largest vehicle that can enter this facility, because in self-storage, you often have very large trucks coming in, bringing people's furniture from out of state. Additionally, new storage facilities. Right next door to another storage facility, there will be price competition, obviously. And then a lot of storage facilities typically do the first month free. Sometimes this can bring in homeless people. And then if the homeless people can't access the storage, they'll loiter around the storage facility. At a lot of our stores, we have door alarms. This makes it so the homeless people can't live inside the storage facility. They'll be tripping alarms if they're trying to get in or out. We have on-site managers also to help make sure that there are no homeless people living in the storage facility. And because this particular facility is so close to all these neighborhoods and in a very brushy hillside, have we considered the impact of what type of people might be coming in here trying to access the facility, not to get in? If they are indeed homeless, are they going to be trying to camp around the facility, smoking cigarettes, possibly starting campfires? And again, you have a lot of residences on a hillside with a lot of dry brush. Those are some of my big concerns for this project.
Thank you. There may be some questions. Okay. Are there any? No. Okay, thank you very much. And then we have Robert Lotto. Please state your name and city of residence for the record.
My name's Robert Lotto. I live in Westlake. I've been living in the Thousand Oaks, Westlake area for about 25 years. I am a manager at the facility next door, Westlake Self-Storage. I've worked there for 14 years, and I take pride in my job. I take pride in the way it's handled and run. And with the new facility next door, the coming and going of trucks, and you mentioned that there was 2250 trips that the truck has to make. That would take about anywhere from 3 to 4 months if they did 50 trips a day, which is a lot of trips. And for that Willow Lane, that is a very busy street. It's a shortcut to go from Hampshire to Thousand Oaks Boulevard, and a lot of people use it. Our facility is such where the second story is about 200 feet towards the back. So if you go by the storage facility, sometimes you can't even, people don't even know that there's a storage facility there because we're up high and the second story is towards the back. Some people just don't know that there's a storage in that facility. And when it comes to being a nuisance in the neighborhood, I've gone to the Montessori school, which is on one side, and with all the kids that are going there every day, with the trucks going in and the land being moved right above the school itself, is going to be very dangerous for the kids. I've gone to the other owners at Athletics Society, and they were concerned if the trucks have to make a U-turn to get into the facility, because you can't get in coming down from Westlake Boulevard. You can't get into that facility without making, you can't get up the driveway. In fact, sometimes on rainy days, because of the way the driveway is muddy, they can't even get up the driveway. So the Athletics Society is concerned that the trucks are going to be coming down that street to make U-turns to get into the correct way to get up that hill. So there's a lot of people that are concerned. PTS Furniture, Marty's Hobbies, which is also opposite the society, the Athletic Society, and they're concerned about the same thing with the trucks. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
Mr. Lotto, how many units do you have at your facility?
Excuse me?
How many units do you have at your facility?
532.
And how many people work on any given shift usually?
Me.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, thank you.
Okay.
Is there anybody else who wanted to fill out a speaker card and speak tonight? Or a written statement card? I don't want to miss anybody. You can come up and then fill out a speaker card afterwards.
Would you like a portable microphone?
And please state your name and city of residence.
Dana Siklitis, Westlake Village. One more. There's that better? Yeah, Danis Iglesias, Westlake Village. We're the hypothetical B. We're the landowner next to this commercial property. And we've been working with Will for, I think, since 2015 to develop 5 lots. And we're getting very close to being able to develop them. And my big concern is that 10-foot easement that they're talking about moving 31,000 yards of dirt down. You know, it's going right next to an existing residential house on Skyline. And then it's also running down, be down the side of our property. And I don't think that it would probably create a lot of impact, you know, for us and for them. So I don't know if that's a viable option. And, you know, as they were talking about moving in wheelbarrows, that's not going to work. You know, they might be able to do a conveyor system, but they're still going to have to convey it across Skyline, you know, one way or another. And that's going to greatly impact the traffic. You know, that's because I know that last time I was here in one of the commission meetings, one of the biggest concerns for the homeowners was traffic. You know, something that's going to block traffic. The people that live there don't want anybody parking along, you know, the sides of the street. You know, and the guy that lives there on the, I think it'd be on the east side, he's put large boulders so that you can't park there. You know, I think it's just a sensitive area. A lot of the water lines are pretty close to the surface of the dirt. So there's a lot of concern that of the people that live there, the impact that all this construction is going to cause. And, you know, my big concern is the height of the building, because I believe that first floor is about 968 in elevation. The roof is about 104, which, you know, if we do our grading on the side of the property, we're going to probably have a 4-foot retaining wall and then have to put a 6-foot high wall on top. That will probably just at house 2 cover the roof. I mean, the building is coming up that high, so it's a pretty high structure.
Do we have any questions? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. You want me to fill out a card?
Yes. The city clerk will help you
All right,
with that.
thanks. Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Let's see. At this point, we're back to the applicant. No? Mr. Chua, do you have any response to any of these things that have
yes,
been
I
brought
do.
up?
Let me start with parking. Like I said in the staff report, parking, the city does not have standards for parking for self-storage. So traditionally, we use the ones for warehouse. Unfortunately, until we have a standard for warehouse parking, we're going to have to use the warehouse standards because that's been our past practice. The conditions that, okay, for as far as the landscaping is concerned, we're not saying that the property does not have enough landscaping. What we're saying is that the sides of the property does not have enough room for ample landscaping so that the visual impact of this project would be somehow reduced by those trees. We're not trying to totally remove the visual impact. We're trying to reduce it. As far as I'm in the landscape issue, Commissioner Newman stated the feasibility, made a statement about the feasibility of long-term survival for the plants. Now, when I spoke to the applicant's consultant regarding the submitted landscape plans, and by the way, what you see as we're present, what the landscape presentation we see is what was submitted to us and what was presented to the applicant when we had last our meeting. So whatever's the last landscape plan I received, That's the one I'm going to use for your presentation. Now, as far as to answer the feasibility of the plans, when I was speaking to the applicant's consultant, I asked her, I said, do you really think that this area here is enough to support the trees that you're proposing, which are 24-inch box trees? And she said, they may survive, but that location is not optimal. And the operating word is not optimal. Now, Mr. Scribner brought out the issues regarding setbacks. There are no setback requirements for M1 zone, except when a property is adjacent to a residentially zoned property. In this case, the east side and the south side are both residentially zoned, which requires a minimum of 10-foot setback. Now, why are we requiring 20-foot setback at the rear of the property? Because based on our municipal code standards, if a structure exceeds 25 feet on a adjacent to the, if a structure exceeds 25 feet, the setback for that side of the building where it exceeds 25 feet will be increased to 20 feet instead of 10 feet. So that addresses the issue of setback. Now, we're not requiring them to do a side setbacks on the side. No. What we're requiring them is to provide enough landscape area, not necessarily setback. We shouldn't mix them up because we cannot require them to go 20 feet setback if our municipal code does not require it. We only are requiring for more landscape planter area. As far as the height of the building is concerned, I apologize for that. That 45 feet is incorrect. I simply went by the project plans you have on your screen, which indicates 45 feet, and I went with the worst case scenario at 45 feet. So for that, I will correct on the record that it looks like it's 27 feet plus 6 feet, or 9 feet. So that's 36 feet. As far as the PTS furnitures, I will give a general answer to most of the buildings that was shown by Mr. Scribner on this presentation, on his submittal to the building. The one thing that is not being mentioned to you is that this building the site sits much higher than its surrounding, than the surrounding properties. The PTS furniture, the Westlake Storage, the Lowe's furniture, Lowe's particularly is sitting on a graded pad, previously graded pad. The Sage Mountain, which was approved by the Planning Commission a while back, it sits on a drainage that was filled to provide the pad for it. It's not something where a particular hillside was graded to reduce the height of this pad, and which is against our freeway corridor guidelines. There's the difference. Most of the building that was pointed out to you, BMW, these do not sit on top of a hillside. The 3 or 4 story buildings that's next to the freeways, these are not adjacent to the freeway. Sage Mountain, which is on Grande Vista, right before the scale, does not silhouette against the backdrop or the ridge line. And like I said, it's on a 54-acre lot, which was subdivided into now this actual site is only 5 acres, which sits right below the property, the total property itself. Let me move on to other issues. Now, as far as the landscape plan is concerned, going back to landscape plans, the proposal does not have 24-inch box trees. The 72-inch box trees was one of the suggested conditions that we shared with the applicant in case that the planning commission decides to approve this. And also, with that condition, staff also requires that the landscape area be increased per determination of the city's landscape consultant to have enough or ample room for healthy growth. So that's as far as that is concerned. Environmental report, no mitigation required. Viewshed. Viewshed is not part of our environmental review. We don't use viewshed in any of the official environmental report that we do. And viewshed is part of our freeway corridor guidelines. So just to make a distinction, this is not part of the environmental review. This is part of the freeway corridor guidelines. So as far as the building being angled and parallel to the freeway, I mean, staff believes that there's not enough articulation to comply with the freeway corridor guidelines. It does not have a sloping facade, which you'll see on the first page of the exhibit submitted by the applicant. I mean, we need sloping facades, which the building doesn't have. So it adds to the massiveness and bulkiness of the building. Now, going back to the other buildings, I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm all over the place here. But as far as the other buildings that were mentioned by Mr. Scrivener, PTS Furniture or whatsoever, if you look along that line, the Conejo Spectrum building, which is across the street from Conejo Ridge, the PTS Furniture, and the Westlake Storage building, which is adjacent to this property. There are all, if you look at them, they are all 2 stories, and they were required to not not cause silhouetting because that's part of our guidelines. This particular project, when you're at it, it sits on top of the hill, and I hate to say this, but it's gonna stick like a sore thumb, is the expression, I guess. Now, Mr. Sandifer made a statement that he said, why do we have to hide the building 100%? We're not asking for 100% concealment for the property. What we're asking for is as much concealment as possible with innovative landscape design as required by our freeway corridor guidelines. Mr. Bauer asked a question about what's the biggest truck that could fit in here. Now, the fire department required them to have a 30-foot wide driveway and a 40-foot wide radius, turning radius. And there's a hammerhead at the very end of the facility. I mean, very end of the driveway. I'm assuming that whatever truck ladder that would reach the building that the fire department has is the size of the truck that can come and go from this facility. Mr. Robert Lotto made a statement about traffic being caused by the amount of grading, 2,250 trips. For every development that we have in the city, there will be some sort of inconvenience to neighboring properties. As part of the grading plan, and I'm going to be freelancing here for Public Works, as far as grading plans concerned, part of the grading plan review is to check the make sure that there's proper staging for the trucks, there's traffic control, slap me if I'm wrong here, traffic control, and to make sure that there's the least disturbance to the neighboring properties. But like I said, this will not be totally quiet or totally hassle-free operation, there's going to be some sort of inconvenience. Mr. Dennis Iglesias mentioned traffic as well. I mean, there will be traffic controls. You will see those gentlemen waving red flags or yellow flags or telling controlling traffic as to and in or going by the Willow Lane. Now, if this project is going on for a few months, people would realize that, hey, you know what, Willow Lane is a hassle, I'm going to avoid it. So, and that's just part of development. I mean, people will be inconvenienced. And thank you for your time.
If I may continue to supplement that information by staff, what's important to note in terms of this particular item and what Mr. Chua was explaining is that the freeway corridor guidelines are intended to supplement the standard requirements in terms of setback, height, architecture, and visibility in the code. So because of the proximity of this property to the freeway and its high visibility, the corridor guidelines provide things that the project would have to comply in addition to what the code requirements are. So to give context to the responses of Mr. Chua, in the location of this project along that side of the freeway, all the buildings in that area are low-rise buildings, and that's by design, particularly because that side of the freeway is higher than the opposite side, which houses the BMW dealership that you saw. In addition to that, the BMW dealership is also somewhat low-rise, being that it's primarily one-story and two-story buildings. It does have a parking structure that's multiple-story, but the stories are condensed and they're masked behind the building, which has no freeway visibility. In terms of the landscaping, and if I may, Chair, I'm going to step over to the overhead projector.
That would be terrific. Thank you. I didn't have your mic on. Start again, please.
And Mr.
I'll
Chua,
get this right.
Thank you, Chair. In Mr. Chua's presentation, he showed you a section of the grading plan, which showed a distinct portion of the hill being removed to create a pad for the building, the parking, the driveway facility. As you can see in the guidelines, that's most like the diagram showed for what is unacceptable development along the freeway corridor. The whole purpose of the freeway corridor guidelines is to maintain the hillside of the natural view in their current state to provide visual interest. If you're altering the hillside, that's what we're trying to get away from. And the architecture for buildings in this particular area are supposed to be designed to complement and enhance the hillside, meaning they step up. One additional diagram that you saw in the presentation, I believe the applicant provided this particular image in your material. What is pictured is unacceptable. What this is showing is landscaping. The landscaping that's planted in these particular areas along the freeway corridor are intended not to mask the hillside. So the top portion of the image is shown as unacceptable because it blocks the hills. If you look down at the acceptable portion in the lower portion, you have landscaping, you can see the buildings. The point of that diagram is that the landscaping should enhance the development. It's part of the design of the architecture, and it should be done in such a way where you can still see the hillside with the building, with the landscaping, but it doesn't cut the hillside and it doesn't mask the view. Mr. Chua went into great detail in terms of architecture. What you see towards the bottom of this image, it shows sort of a boxy-like architectural style, which Mr. Chua depicted in his presentation as unacceptable for the freeway corridor. What is acceptable is shown towards the top of the page, where you have a building that has a wedding cake sort of concept that steps back at each stage. It provides architectural articulation, and it has a roof structure that doesn't mask the hillside behind it. So the point of that is these hillside guidelines are intended to go above and beyond what you would have ordinarily in the code, just because of the highly sensitive nature of this particular location in this area. There were a number of projects mentioned, such as the Lowe's project. Now, that is visible from the freeway, but as you drive by, you see the hillside in the distance of that project, and the Lowe's site was also previously disturbed. There was a previous development that was there that was removed, and the Lowe's site is being built on that. In terms of encroachment upon that hill, it's a very small portion at the rear of the building, which is also at the bottom of the hill. So it didn't change the visual character of that particular neighborhood. So those are some of the differences that Mr. Chua pointed out in his staff report and presentation, and that he brought up in the rebuttal to sort of provide context to what you're reviewing here this evening.
Excuse me, Mr. Parker. Can I ask you to show me one thing while you're up there on the overhead? I just want to be clear about that adjacent parcel that the owner would like to move the dirt to. Can you show it on one of the diagrams, one of the site plans, so I can see which parcel they're talking about in relationship to the one that we're talking about now?
One moment as staff pulls up the map.
Thank you. I think that might be helpful for somebody else besides me. I don't know. Commissioner Newman?
Thank you. If I may, it's attachment 2 in our packet. Shows the surrounding area.
Thank you.
Commissioner Chair McMahon, it's in this on the screen right now. This is the property that we are dealing with right now. This is the project site, and this is Willow Lane, Skyline, and this is the vacant lot that was that you're interested in. Where the red arrow?
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. You're finished up there. Okay. Are there any other questions, Commissioner?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Chua, while we're talking about surrounding properties and heights and all that, you said in your comments that the site sits much higher than surrounding properties. And I had the same impression when I walked the property. I had the impression of looking almost directly down on the tops of surrounding buildings, certainly of the school to the east. However, we've also been talking a lot tonight about the significant amount of cut that would be proposed for this. And I think the staff's report said it would be a reduction of something like 20 feet in height. So my question is, would the statement that the site or the building sits higher than surrounding properties, would that statement still be true after this 31,000 cubic yards of earth is removed?
Yes.
All right, thank you. And then
Now,
the other question, go ahead.
sorry.
I'm sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
If you want to imagine how high this is going to be, if you go up the driveway right now, that's where it's going to be. That's the height of the building, because what they're trying to do is chase the driveway to meet with the minimum driveway grade or the maximum allowed.
So, as was noted by the applicant, there are several, I think 3 houses on the property currently. And you're saying, just so I'm clear, the first house, I believe, is right at the top of the driveway there. That would be the beginning height of the buildings?
That's approximately where the graded pad would be, the finished grade for the parking lot, unless Mr. Don Waite, who's no longer here, can say otherwise, because I'm going to show you where the natural grade is. This is the natural grade line right here. So coming from Willow Lane, you go up, turn around, and go through this driveway right here. So this is the natural terrain line right here. So, and this, it comes down here where the existing house is showing, as you see right now. So this is going to be where that grade is. So they're going to drop probably as high as 30 feet back here, 35 feet on this side, and then about almost maybe 10 feet here. So I kind of average it out about 20 feet.
All right, but you're characterizing, even with the 20-foot reduction, your characterization is that it's still higher
Yes, it is.
than the surrounding
Yes, it is.
properties. Right, okay, thank you. And then also, and if you're not able to answer this question, please say so. I'm putting you on the spot as a tree expert for the moment, but we've talked a bit about trees, and there's some lack of clarity as to whether as to the size of the trees that would go in, whether they're 24-inch or 72-inch, and that's fine. Maybe it's not decided yet. But whatever the height or the size of the trees that go in, the size of the box, are you able to estimate how long it would take for the trees, whatever their size, to reach the height that is shown in the simulation provided by the applicant?
No.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of staff? Commissioner Lanson?
Mr. Chua, in light of the applicant's comments with regard to the potential change of the application for parking and the height and articulation, stuff like that, would there be any problem with us, with you or your office, if we continued this for, say, a few months to let you guys finish the negotiation process to get all the items that you can get resolved before we actually do that? Would that create a problem for you guys?
Well, the best in my position, and I'm gonna freelance again for Deputy Director Parker. He's not looking good at me. He's not looking at me. So now,
smiling though.
I mean, in my opinion, the Planning Commission would best give us a direct instruction of what do you want to see as far as compliance with the freeway corridor guidelines. Do you want to see a 1-story, 2-story, 3-story, 4? Because that will eliminate the back and forth between the applicant and staff to say, hey, you know what? I think the commission's meeting this, or the commission means that. So it would be nice to have a very objective goal of what the commission wants to see. Am I putting you guys on spot
Well,
here?
I believe me, I understand that. My concern is we have a new idea for transporting dirt that we've never seen before. We have other ideas of things. Applicants said that they would modify their plans. I don't think we have an in-focus idea of actually what it is we're even voting on.
If I may add to that comment, if it's the commission's decision to try to continue this item and the applicant is agreeable to it, staff is more than willing to continue to work with them to find compliance with the freeway corridor guidelines. I can't say with any degree of certainty how long that would take. So if that were the direction the commission took, I would recommend a date uncertain.
Okay.
And just for the record, it's important to note that it's the applicant's decision to make that decision tonight. Tonight's her night, and you've heard staff's recommendation, and obviously you've heard the response from the applicant, and the applicant does have a rebuttal in the next for the next 5 minutes when it comes up. But it is important to note that ultimately the decision is the applicant's for tonight.
As someone a little new to this, I have a question for Mr. Chua as well. Hypothetically speaking, if they were going to move 31,000 cubic feet of dirt onto that other lot that's over there, What are the rules as far as the city goes for that, and what is the impact on that terrain itself and the grading and the slope of that?
Staff hasn't had an opportunity to vet that particular sort of response. So one, we don't know if it's possible or not yet. We don't know exactly what that route is, and it's unclear to us at this point who has access to that easement and what that easement is to be used for. So that's something that staff would have to evaluate in order to answer.
I'm not even asking how they get it there. My question is are they allowed to just go ahead and put it there? I mean, that's going to change the slope and the appearance of that ridge line as well. And is that impacted by our city guidelines or by the freeway corridor guidelines?
It would be something that would have to be considered in addition to that as well.
Are there any other questions? Okay, so then we'll bring back Mr. Scribner for 5 minutes. And once again, state your name and city of residence.
Neil Scribner, architect, Thousand Oaks. Concerning the property owner to the rear, one of the reasons we set the building down was to reduce the impact to that rear property. In the ordinance, you have to have a 20-foot setback landscape if there's residential. This has 30 feet because of that 10-foot easement, which we can use for landscaping. The mountain goes on up behind this hill, behind this building, so the first floor of the house will be above this project. So we're not going to be blocking any views there. There won't be any need for any retaining or whatever. If he wants to build a wall or plant something to hide, that's fine, but we're going to plant back there as well, including trees. Regarding the 18-wheelers, like I say, we have the 40-foot inside diameter for fire trucks. If an 18-wheeler can get to this site, then they can certainly get on the site. They don't need the fire department turnaround. There's a turnaround within the site. They can go up, back, or they can turn right and then back. There are two ways they can turn around, even with an 18-wheeler, which we don't expect to have here anyway. I forgot to mention this. There's apparently a standard for self-storage of 7 square feet per inhabitant or person. And the city currently has 5 square feet, so there is room for an additional space. Security-wise, we didn't talk about it. The person sitting in the office in this project will have monitors. Every unit will have a camera on it, inside and out. All the corridors, everything. So if there's anybody who shouldn't be there, that'll be obvious to the person sitting in the office. If someone opens the wrong storage unit, there's an alarm sounds. So there's total security here. Plus the building's locked, so no one can get in that shouldn't be there. They all have some way to pass to get in. So that's not an issue. Of course, we're going to build a construction fence around this during construction. That'll keep the kids from accessing the property, which they can today. There's a building on Conejo right around the corner that has a 30-foot cut behind the building. So cuts is very common. Where the In-N-Out Burger used to be the post office along the freeway, that has a 20-foot cut behind it, like, I don't know, several hundred feet long, a straight line. So it's very common. Mr. Parker said on Lowe's that the intrusion was at the back of the building. So I assume it's okay then. And that's exactly where we are, at the back. Our intrusion cannot be seen into the 25%, can't be seen in the front. Remember, the front 2/3 of the site has already been graded. Whatever intrusions, it's already happened 70 years ago, I guess, whenever it happened. Floor to floor, as I said, is 9 feet. Parking garage is closer to 10 or 11 feet. The parcel, I guess you found that. It's a half a block away. It's on the corner facing the freeway where we're going to take the dirt. And I think conveyor is just an idea we talked about, client and I. We realize we have to get approval. If that's not acceptable, we certainly won't do it. Just tell us. And as Will said, it's typical for all projects to have exporting, some more, some less, depending on their situation. And so we will haul that in the normal style if that's what you want to see. I'm reading the environmental checklist, potential environmental impacts against this report that my client paid so much money for. It says here that because the buildings are 172 feet from the freeway, you can imagine if as the example shows, a 3-story building 20 feet from the freeway, 45 feet tall, you're looking up here. But if a building, even on a hill, that's 200 feet to the first lane of the freeway, maybe more, is back there, then you're actually, the building appears lower to you than if you're right next to it. So the fact that it's on a hill doesn't really, and it's 200 feet back from the first lane of the freeway, really reduces the impact dramatically. Plus, I don't quite understand still the staff's approach here. It sounds like they want to hide the building. If they're looking for the right amount of trees, then we'll be happy to work with them and do exactly the right amount, because that's not a problem. So,
thank you.
It's also, let me one more thing here, I'm sorry. It says the buildings have been designed to be in conformance with the architectural guidelines and building height requirements as set forth in the city's municipal code. The building averages under 35 feet in height. We're allowed to average 35, but we're well under it. And it's 27 feet in the front. So we certainly don't exceed any guidelines, any heights, any ordinance, anywhere. We're not asking for any variances. That's it, I guess.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Commissioner?
Mr. Scribner, in your rebuttal, you started out by referring to, for storage, a standard, and you talked about 5 square feet and 7.5 square feet. 2 questions on this. First of all, what standard is this? Whose standard is it? And 2, could you clarify what you mean when you refer to 5 or 7.5 square feet?
Well, actually, it's a national self-storage. I mean, there's a society, and
this is an industry consortium or a government body, or
no? It's a private. It's a group that I think sends information to people that manages these centers, and they keep records around the country.
It's private industry standard.
Yeah, it's an industry standard.
Okay, and then what is the 5 square foot?
Average.
Sorry, what does the 5 square foot and 7 square foot refer to?
And 7 square feet per person.
I'm sorry, what is when we say 5 or whatever?
7 is the national average, and we are 5, so we're under.
I'm just trying to clarify what unit of measurement. We're saying 5 square feet. Do we mean
per person?
Right, but what I'm getting at is does that refer to the square footage of the whole building, or the whole lot, or square foot per what?
That's
is my question.
Each person in an average city, apparently.
Yes.
In the United States, the average is 7 square feet per person. That's it. That would be a unit's 7 square feet.
So it's a per capita
person.
measurement based on population? I'm sorry, I'm not grasping what the square foot refers to.
If a city had 20,000 people, it would require 7 square feet per person.
It's a per capita.
Per capita.
Right, got it.
Here, we provide 5 existing, so we're under the national average.
Got it, okay. All right, thanks very much.
Okay.
I have nothing further.
Commissioner?
Just one question, Mr. Scrivener. Is there any interest in continuing this matter so that you guys can work on the details and actually get an agreement, or do you want the vote?
Yes, that's fine. I would like some guidance because, you know, the client before this that owned the property worked for 8 years. He had a 2-story medical building, and the staff would not approve it. And so he finally gave up, sold it to this client. We come in with a building that's 30% lower. It's still too much. I read you all the rules and the guidelines we have to follow. We're 35% footprint. We can do 50. We only required 10% landscaping. Mr. Parker was asking for more. We are actually 5 times what's required per code. I don't know how we can do more. But if you have some ideas or suggestions, I'd be pleased to hear them.
I think some of the comments were towards the articulation of the building and some other issues. And again, I guess the question being is to you is how interested are you making any changes? You had indicated before a change in terms of the dirt transportation, in terms of some of the parking issues. Again, I'm just trying to find areas of agreement.
Okay. Well, let me say on the parking, if you want what staff recommends, we will do it. I'm just saying we were asked to spend money to hire a consultant. The consultant recommends 13 spaces. We only need 3, frankly. That's enough. But we will provide whatever you want to do. I'd like to see us, as Kelvin said, we don't have a city standard for self-storage. I don't know why we haven't done it in all these years, because this issue always comes up. All these extra spaces, if you visit, they'll have boats in them. They'll have some more storage. They'll have trucks, things you really don't want outside. By reducing the parking, we get rid of that. And we could turn the parking into landscaping. So I think why not do what the experts tells us? 13 cars that's like 5 times or 4 times more than we actually need.
I understand that. I think the question being is the process that's used. I guess the question being, and again, this is actually back to Mr. Parker and Mr. Heer, whether we can do a piecemeal decision in terms of giving some guidance on height and other things without actually making a final decision on the entirety.
I would hesitate about doing that. Just frankly, one of the things that we always discuss is trying not to design from the dais. And I think that's certainly a common sense approach. Obviously, I think, as I said before, we have some choices here. And I just heard something from the applicant as to, or Mr. Scrivener, as to what his response was to your question. But I think we would want to make sure that that is done formally. I think my thought would be that we've seen the staff report and the staff's recommendation. So obviously one choice would be to have the hearing and move forward with a decision, close the hearing, and then have your comments and decision, whatever that is, tonight. You can do that. Another thing would be to continue the discussion of possibly continuing this matter to a date uncertain and discuss some of these matters that have been brought up tonight. Obviously, you pointed out to a number of them, including transportation of the dirt in some way with a conveyor belt of some kind, and other things, windows and articulation and things of that nature. I would hesitate really of trying to pinpoint everything down because it just would be difficult, and we'd probably be here for a long time trying to figure that out. So my recommendation would be either to, again, this is something for you to decide as a commission, would be to say, would the applicant maybe entertain continuing the matter? That would have to be their choice to continue this matter to a date uncertain. And again, I can't, I will speak for staff because I've been with staff for a number of years. We certainly take great pride in our efforts to meet with any applicant to discuss issues, pros and cons, and are always open for that. It might take some time just to the number of people that we have and on staff at this point, but certainly we are always going to address those and have done that in the past and will continue to do so in the future. So in that sense, we certainly would be willing and open, as Mr. Parker said, to take such action if that is the choice of the applicant. But again, it is his choice tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Heer. I guess my question being is we've solved a lot of issues tonight in terms of getting farther down the road in the process. With regard to those two options, from an applicant standpoint, is there a preference you have in terms of either letting us go ahead and with the vote tonight or continuing the entire thing to a date uncertain?
If you'd have to come to the podium. And once again, state your name and city of residence, please.
Yes. James Sandifer, owner, developer. Several things. On the conveyor belt, this is something we thought of because it is kind of possible. It's not for sure. We got to go through a lot of hurdles and check that all out and make sure that would work. As far as some of the questions about the traffic and the driveway and all that, the driveway is going to be totally reconfigured. It's going to be a lot wider, and it's a lot less steep. And also, during in the next year, the city, with federal money and the city money, they're going to be redoing all of Willow Lane and widening it. And so that's going to make, we'll be opening our driveway at the same time. Hopefully, we're working about the same time there. And the lot on Skyline, it's not like the lot is 6 to 8 feet lower than the street right now. It's a big hole, and it used to be a total ravine, and some fill was put on it before. On the oaks, the oak being removed, one oak being removed, and one Toyon bush. A Toyon is a bush, and I guess it's something that is required to, you can't get new Toyons. So we were going to put 6 more oaks in. There'll be 4 24-inch boxes, 2 36-inch box oaks, and they'll be on the front slope and on the side, the west side, as per the landscape plan. The rear setback to the residential is really 30 feet because there's a 10-foot easement back there plus a 20-foot setback. And like Neil said, the residents behind will be silhouetted on the hill more than we will. They'll be above us because it is a hill. And, we are cut into the hill, and I'm not sure what Mr. Parker was stating about structure. The buildings can't be put into the hill. It can't be cut into the hill. This happens to be the next 6 buildings to the west from us. The self-storage is right here, cut into the hill. This is the PTS furniture right here. It's cut into the hill, and it's, the hill's behind it, silhouetted. Around the corner, there's a building here, a concrete tilt-up. And you can see, it's cut. This is like 30 feet tall here, and it's cut into there. This is around the corner on Conejo Ridge, but it's right there. And it's backed up to us. We're right behind here. What was I going to say? So, it's, on the hill, it's kind of, that's what you do to mitigate and make it into the hill. And that's the way we interpret the scenic view corridor, and also our building, as we showed you. It's not a flat surface. We do have different levels and the roof articulates back. And like Neil was saying also, it's 170 feet from the first lane of the freeway, the scenic corridor. You can't see this building except from the 10th lane, the one on the very far side. You may see some at the very top, and it's still at this angle that, you can't see it from that side. And when we superimpose the buildings on here, this is exactly the way it's going to look. Here's the PTS furniture. We left that power pole there to show, because we did a survey and got the height that's the 4th story back there. This is the 3rd floor. That's the height that's going to be. these trees are existing. We didn't add those in the picture. They're there. And then we'll be adding more. And this also, it sounds scary being 4 stories. But the PTS furniture is 2 stories, but it's the same height because they have much taller ceilings and they have a big parapet on the roof. So they're still at around 35 feet. We're 9 feet from floor to floor. So inside it's a little over 8 feet. We use concrete floor, about 5 inches. So it's 9 feet, 18, 27 would be the roof on the first part, and then 36 in the back. Any questions?
Do you have any questions?
Did I explain? Did I help with anything?
I think you were helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Does staff have any follow-up comments?
Just a few, just a couple regarding the setback. You don't count the setback on an easement on a different property. You still have to count the setback from your property line on the rear. It's not 30 feet. It's going to be 20 feet. As far as the cut is being very common, yes, that's true. Cut on a hillside, not necessarily on a hillside, but cut on a hillside is very common, but in this particular case, this is on top of a hillside. There's a difference between, like an example for Lowe's. Lowe's was approved for an encroachment within 25% or greater slope. That's 1,700 square feet. That's only 1,700 square feet. Not that big of an encroachment. Now this one here, they're digging the hillside below, which is adjacent to the freeway. As far as the height requirement, we don't have a problem as far as compliance with the municipal code as far as height requirement is concerned. We're not arguing that. We know that it does comply with the height standards as far as the municipal code is concerned. However, like Mr. Parker pointed out earlier, because of the location of this property, which is next to the freeway, it's subject, any property that's within 1,000 feet of the 101 or the 23 freeway is subject to these freeway corridor guidelines. It's an additional guidelines that or regulation, not regulation, but guidelines that we impose on such properties. Now, as far as the view shed corridor, no impact on view shed. I've already addressed that issue earlier. There's a difference between what CEQA requires and what the city as a guideline require. So that's I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think all our rebuttal time is over. So I want to put a question to you right now. Would you prefer us to continue this to a date uncertain, or would you like us to vote on what we have before us today? Oh, I'm so sorry. This is my first time as chair.
Oh,
so
this isn't working again?
now it's working. So
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess we're going to ask to continue it. I'm not sure what we can put on. This is a hill, it's the highest portion of Willow Lane, and so it is higher, and I'm not sure what you can do. I mean, it has to be a viable project, and any project up here, like say the office building, the medical office building before this, was turned down also, and this was a lot better use. The office building had a lot of parking, had a parking structure in front where we have landscaping, had a parking structure in front with 2 levels, and then a parking structure underneath because they need so much parking, and 2 levels above. So, I don't want to, I really don't want a denial, but, so I guess we continue working on it. I mean, we've worked on it for a year, and I'm not sure what it's going to take.
So,
If I may, Chair, just for the record, I just
Okay.
want to be clear. I think the reason why the question was asked to you, sir, is as to whether you wanted to continue it. It wasn't about, there's been no discussion on the motion or any motion whatsoever. So what's going to happen, the procedure would be that we would, if you're done and the meeting goes forward, what would happen is we close the hearing. There's no more public comment from anybody. The commissioners discuss it themselves and make a decision. I have no idea what the decision would be tonight, but one of the commissioners asked you, based on some of the comments today, obviously, that there might be a desire for you to continue the matter. So really the question is do you want to continue the matter? And that's your right, or you can say, I want to have my hearing tonight and have a decision made tonight. That's also your right. I just want to be clear about those two choices. It's certainly up to you to do that. If you do not want to continue the matter, which is absolutely fine with you, if that's what you want to do, what then happens procedurally is that the chair would close the hearing, then they discuss it among themselves, and they make a decision after their comments, and that could take as long as they want to take it. There could be a motion to do that. It's just that if you were to say later on you wanted to have a continuance, we'd have to reopen the hearing again. That's why the commissioner is asking you ahead of time, just because of what happened today. That's the only reason for that.
Well, like I said, I don't know if I get a denial tonight. Does that make it, what do? We start over again? I'm not sure how that.
So if the decision was made tonight after we closed the hearing and the commission decided to deny your project, you would have a 10-day right to appeal that. It could also be denied without prejudice. You could bring it back to the planning commission. Those would be the options that would happen. Just like if it was granted or denied, somebody else could also have 10 days to appeal that decision. If it's not appealed, then it goes. There is a cost with an appeal that would have to be done again, and you have to notice the appeal within 10 days of tonight's hearing. But again, the reason why the commissioner brought that to your attention was simply because if you want to continue it at some point in time after we close the hearing, we would have to reopen the hearing to do that.
Excuse me.
Commissioner Newman?
I'll wait a minute until the applicant is ready, because I want the applicant to hear my question. This might help clarify your decision,
Okay.
or not. But Mr. Heer, I want to ask a question about Sage Mountain on Grande Vista, which has come up before. My understanding is that years ago there was a previous application on that site for essentially a box-shaped office building that I believe came before the commission. This is before my time, and was voted down. And then the current project was approved by the commission. I was one of the yes votes for that. My question is, were those two completely separate applications, or was it bringing back the same application in a different form? How did that work?
I'm not sure if Mr. Chua would remember that. I will tell you that my recollection for the Sage Mountain, initially it was an approved project with a certain type of architecture, and then there was some changing of the developer or owner issue, and then it was brought back because they didn't want to make some material or major changes to that project, and therefore they had to bring it back to Planning Commission. And so the second time I recall bringing it back, there was other discussion about the architecture and the parking that was going to be behind it. Some of the things had to be changed based on some other work that was done.
Well, setbacks in particular were a salient part of the second.
There were a number of issues. I just would
Right.
hesitate to speak specifically. I don't recall one being denied before. I think there was one project that was approved and then it was materially changed, and so they had to bring it back. Those changes were, again, a new kind of building structure and design, as you recall. But I couldn't give you any more specifics than that, and I certainly don't have the plans in front of me, unfortunately, tonight.
Okay, so we're not sure if that was one, we're not 100% sure if that was one application or
Correct.
multiple.
Since I don't want to be quoted on, I can't tell you for sure without looking at it.
Then I'm no help to you at all, Mr. Sanford. I was just wondering, as a matter of process, whether that project was also an office building, a box-shaped office building, and the current form is different than that. It's set back into the hill.
Mhm.
And it may have been one application, as we're discussing tonight, or it might not have been. But the commission did approve the second form.
Yeah. Well, you know,
I hope that context helped you in making your
that helps.
decision.
I just don't know, you know, we do have the articulation of, you know, moving different levels, you know, the roof. I just don't, I'm not sure how I would change it. I think it looks good. I want a great looking project. You know, I built a couple of storages. Actually, I sent to Will. We were facility of the year for the self-storage industry in 1992 when I built my first storage when I was in my early 30s. And because we built it very nice and made it fit with the neighborhood and all that, and that's what we want to do here. You know, we don't want to be that sore thumb on the hill. You know, we think it's a good-looking project. It's cut into the hill to, you know, to soften it up. And I don't know, but I guess at this point we better try to get staff more on our side and better continue it to a later date. I guess would be the best route right now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So what I would do is, based on his statement, I think I would just do a motion to continue the matter to a date uncertain for the Planning Commission and specifically identify the project.
Okay, can I have a motion?
I'll go ahead and move to allow him to continue that.
Okay. Do we need to
Yep.
put
So I
out
think
all the numbers
sure.
in and all? Okay.
So just to make sure I'm clear, the motion would be to continue the matter of SUP.
It would be SUP 2009-7049/OTP 2011-70164/LTP 2018-70271.
And that motion would be to continue a date uncertain. Okay. So can you prepare a vote for us, please?
Motion carries 4-0 with Commissioner Cohan recusing.
And now, can I ask, Mr. Heard, do you, or actually Mr. Parker, Mr. Chua, do you want us to give you some ideas about what we would like to see coming forward? Or
No.
No?
No. Staff
Okay.
would be more than willing to work with the applicant on that.
Okay, thank you. That's all I need. So I guess we can welcome
Long time
back
no see.
Mr. Cohen. Okay, so where are we now? Department reports. There are no department reports this evening, so item number 10, commission comments and 1234 reports. Do we have any of those? Commissioner?
I don't have any AB 1234 reports, but I do have two comments. One, again, I'd like to welcome Commissioner Cohen, Commissioner Buss. Welcome to your new roles. Glad to have you here. Glad to have the commission back at full strength again. The other is just a quick request of staff. I noticed the public hearing board in front of the application tonight didn't have a date on it, even though the agenda has given the date for this hearing for several months. So wasn't like a date uncertain thing. It was, so staff's done a great job of getting the word out through other means as to when hearings occur, but I get asked all the time, hey, when's this item coming up or that one? So it'd be good to have consistency in the signage as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Lanson?
I just wanted to, again, well, I didn't get to say it before, to welcome Commissioner Cohan and Commissioner Buss. Really appreciate us being at full strength, really appreciate you guys being here and being part of the process. Again, the great thing about the staff is fantastic. Mr. Parker and Mr. Heher are very, very well informed and here to help with all different aspects. If I were to say anything in terms of advice is realize we're an executive body that's here to enforce the rules. We don't legislate from the dais. We actually are here to just enforce the rules and make sure that those processes are being done.
And I'll make a quick comment. Thank you, everybody, for your patience with me. I will get better, I think, especially with the microphone. And thank you, Mr. Heher, for your advice and your notes. And also welcome to our 2 new commissioners. I'm really pleased that you're here. Item number 11, staff update. Mr. Parker, are there any follow-up items?
We do not have any tonight. Thank you, Chair.
All right. And at this point, I will adjourn. No? No?
We do. Our next meeting is scheduled for April 1st. There'll be 2 items on that agenda.
Okay. Thank you. Once again, you're keeping me in line. All right.
May. I think before we discussed with regard to the cell tower application coming up in May, is that off calendar officially?
No, that's currently still on calendar.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Are we ready? Okay. I will adjourn the meeting to the next regular meeting of April 1st, 2019 at 6 p.m. Thank you, everyone.